Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Cindy Daychuk with Queen Bee Creations. Thanks for joining me today. We are going to do something just super fun and something I've been dying to do. I've been seeing a lot of people on YouTube picking up old pictures and prints and then transforming them, using them as a basis for their art. Now, I'm not a real artist, so I'm not going to be painting in extra people and all that kind of stuff. But let me show you what I did find and what I'm thinking. So, I found this. Cool, right? Okay, so a little farmish, but I think super fun, especially because it's in those aged colors. It's kind of a little bit fall decorish, which is perfect. And I just got my IOD pumpkin molds. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna have to cut this open and I wanna take it apart. I don't want this glass, which I don't know if it's glass or plastic. I'll find out. So I'm gonna take it apart. I want to lighten the frames. So I'm gonna go with Sandy Blonde by DIY. So I'm gonna get the frame painted out. Then we can distress back to the brown and add aging as we go. But I'm gonna get it painted and then just the picture put back in, because with what we're gonna do, we're probably gonna wanna overlap stuff onto the frame. So I wanna add the frame all back in. So all I'm gonna do, take it apart and get rid of the glass, paint out the frame, and then we'll be back for the fun stuff. We have our frame painted out. So again, I use Sandy Blonde by DIY, clay-based paint, so it does not have a built-in sealer, which allowed me to be able to wet distress it, just lightly, so you can see some of the details of that frame. Looks totally different without the dark frame. Now we are going a little bit darker because this seems a little too strong, but we got a lot to do still, so don't worry. I'm leaving the frame unsealed right now because once I get my pumpkins and I get all my molds attached, I'm gonna want to seal them then. I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm gonna seal it at some point. I'm gonna be sealing the whole thing at some point, and so I'm just saving the frame for then too. I may apply some of the color to the pumpkins first. And again, we're gonna try and do that in a little bit muted. But I'm gonna get a bunch of pumpkins, and so I'm using the Hello Pumpkin mold, which I love. They're beauty, and there's so much detail, and the leaves are gorgeous, and it's got the little tendrils, and so nice. I am gonna be using the previous release, all of the mushrooms. I think that that's going to go perfectly with that. And then Dewdrop Pond has, like some snails in there, and and salamander. I may squeeze one or two of those guys in as well. I think they all work beautifully together. So we're gonna start building some molds. I am going to be using air dry clay for this because I'm gonna want to layer them. I'm gonna want to have a pumpkin peeking out from behind, so I'm gonna want to cut some of them, and it's just gonna give me more flexibility to do that, to arrange things how I might want, rather than with like some resin or anything. So I want the flexibility of the clay. So I'm gonna pull you in and we can talk a little bit about using the clay, especially for those of you that this is your first time. I'll put this off to the side and then I'll get a bunch done, and then we get to play with layout and cutting them apart and fitting them together. The fun stuff. Using the molds with your clay is dead simple. The first thing I'm doing is I'm just taking cornstarch. I have a long-handled paintbrush just so I can reach down to the bottom, but I'm just going to brush my molds with cornstarch. And this just helps to release them. Now, your molds are food safe. So you could make great big pumpkin cookies with this, you know, using sugar cookie dough, or maybe maybe some gingerbread. I mean, you know, whatever works. The little gingerbread people, of course, obviously are great for gingerbread, but they work for chocolate molds or fondant, or there's a lot of people that have done pie pastry. Just what you want is whatever, if you're using them for cookies, you want to use a cookie recipe that doesn't spread, so that you keep all of these fabulous details. I do have a Christmas video from quite a while ago that I did some Christmas cookies with the trees and snowflakes when they came out. Awesome. So you can always look back for that video to be able to get, I posted the sugar cookie recipe I used. Now I'm using the IOD air dried clay. You can use other clays. It's really, you know, your personal preference. I find that there's less shrinkage with this one. And you know what? I'm gonna need lots. So let me just show you with the smaller. There's a micro rim, a raised edge around these molds that allows you to kind of pull your clay against it and almost cut off your clay, which gives you a nice crisp edge. Okay, so you're able to just kind of push it against that. Some people will use maybe like a, I have something here like a spatula idea, or a credit card, or, you know, a spreader. So if you've got maybe arthritis in your hands or something, and it's too painful to do it this way, then you know what? There's always options. I like to have a fair whack of clay if I'm filling a big surface, only because I don't like to have tiny little bits and pieces that I'm working together. So obviously these pumpkins, when we're talking about clay, are gonna take a fair bit. But again, I'm gonna want to be able to piece them. Now you could, if you knew that you wanted to have a whole big pumpkin, you could make this out of resin, and then you could do other pumpkins out of clay, because maybe those are the pieces that you only want to have half of. So if you are great at pre-planning, then you could, if you're painting them all, you could mix and match. Have some with resin, have some with clay, and it's really just what your usage is. But if it's easier for you to do most of your pieces in the resin because you're just pouring and they harden, go for it. I'm gonna get a bunch of these done and off to the side, and we'll come back with the print and start laying them out. I just thought that I'd pop on here very quickly to show you how I unmold these. I would flip it over, and I'm gonna slowly peel this back. Because they're highly detailed, I usually have the same brush that I use to dip into my cornstarch, and I just tease them out. This isn't as important for some of the big ones, but sometimes the little ones with the little details, you know what? You just have to help them a little bit more. Now that we have our pumpkins and molds done, it's time to just kind of work on the layout, right? I did a couple of the pumpkins, and I'm thinking if I curve this one, well, okay, I kind of like him in front. All right, well, who knows? But I also want to take advantage of some of the mushrooms and have them overlapping and maybe coming up over the frame, right? So that we're not just all locked in here. So that's kind of where I'm thinking with this pumpkin, maybe get him overlapped. And I might have this mushroom in behind a bit. It's just about the layering. All right, I'm kind of liking you curling. So let's take you back. All right. A couple of other mushrooms. Oh, we have lots to play with. Little mushroom in the shade over here. Another one up over the edge. All right, so this is all that we do. We just start playing with it, and as much as I've laid them out like this, I may change them. I don't know. I kind of like that little guy sitting up on there, but I have a bigger one that I may have crawling up the frame, the little snails. And then I still have leaves to go. I did have some leftover cement ones that I had made, so if I feel like I needed more, I could pop those in and glue them on. I'm just going to be using some Gorilla wood glue to glue things down, and I'm just going to let them set up a little bit. I'm probably not going to wait for them to fully dry before we start painting, but I just want to get enough on, like enough of a crust over the top that when I go to paint, I'm not mushing them too badly. So let me kind of work on layout and gluing them down, but you get the rough idea of how we're going here. Now that I have my transfers, my molds all in place, and they're not fully dry yet, but they are definitely dry on top. This happens to be right underneath the big overhead fan here. So they've got a little bit more cracking than you might have normally because they dried fast, but because I'm going to be doing a lot of aging with them, I don't mind. What I am doing, I've got a little bit of water in my cup, and I've got cake batter from DIY. What I want to do is I want to create a bit of a yellowed wash. The background of my picture is mostly yellow, and what I want is everything to be a little bit more unified. It doesn't mean that this is my finished color. It just means this is my base color. And then we'll be adding more paint on top. But I figured before I leave here for the day, I want to get this base on so that it will be dry when we come in tomorrow. So you can see it's very pale. It's very thin. I'm not looking for it to be opaque. I just want that wash, that translucent look, so that I have a bit of this echoing up. And if I don't end up painting the entirety of my piece, it's got that pale kind of, almost that ochre yellow look to it. So I'm gonna get all of my molded sections painted out in this color and then leave it to dry overnight. It doesn't have to dry overnight, but I'm going for the night, so it gets to have overnight to dry. All right, I didn't go home yet. I'm still here. I decided that it would actually be good. Most of this wash is kind of absorbed and dry. And because some of the detail work I'm going to want to do on dry paint, I decided it would be best to get some of this done tonight. So I'm going to be using all DIY colors. So this is Summer Crush, which I love. It's a nice muted orange. This is Fire Starter, which is a much brighter orange. I'm thinking that I'd like to, I'm trying to see where you guys can see. I'd like to do this all in sort of muted tones, just in keeping with the rest of the picture. So I'm gonna try and do sort of washes. We're gonna do some aging over top and that sort of thing as well. But I'm going to start by doing softer colors and then building layers if and as I see fit. So I have the Summer Crush to do the pumpkins. I've got, I have a whack of colors out here. I have some of the greens, Fancy Farm Girl being one of the main greens that I'll be using, but I have some other lighter tones to kind of mix with it, a lot of the beiges. The idea here is just keeping it soft, keeping it muted, getting on this basic coat now so that it has a chance to dry fully. So when I go to do the details tomorrow, I have a nice dry surface, and that sounds like a better plan to me. This is the color palette that I ended up using. You can see that there's very few colors on here, but I have mixed a lot of them. I had a gray and a cherry picked. This green was mixed with the cake batter and the Fancy Farm Girl. This is the orange that I originally gone with, the Summer Crushed, and I used a tinge of this, tinge of this brighter orange, you know, just in highlights here and there. But when I started adding the cherry picked to the tops of some of my toadstools, I ended up going and adding some of the cherry picked down on the bottom of the pumpkins. Same thing, that I've got some leaves up at the top. I don't know if you know that there's leaves at the top. But when I painted those in, I added a tinge of orange into them just for continuity. And it's one of the ways that you just kind of create some balance. Now, the next thing I want to do is I do have some Tonbow, Tonbow, water-based paint pens. And these are actually double-ended. We've got a little narrow tip, and you've got a paintbrush tip. And these are what I'm going to use to just add a little bit of detail. So in essence, we're going to go in and we're just going to highlight some of the details on, you know, the molds are fabulous. They've got awesome detailing. We're just going to make sure that we can see it. So, you know, like we've got these tendrils, these curlicues coming out. And I'm just going to want to be able to see them a little bit. And for me, easier to take a paint pen to do that than it is to try and do that with a little fine paintbrush. So I'm going to go in and just add a few details here and there. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm just going to try and highlight some that are on the molds that get lost when I do the painting. And then I want to leave this to sit overnight for sure so that it's fully dry when I come back and I try and do the sealing, because after we've got it sealed, then I do want to do a little bit of aging with it as well. Early in the morning, still have wet hair. It's I've got sales on right now with paint, and it's too busy. It's too busy during the day for me to get any work done, so I'm popping in early. So this has had overnight to dry, and this looks very soft and muted, right? But the DIY paint dries lighter. So what I want to do, our picture frame was unsealed as well, is I want to start sealing the paints with some clear wax. And you'll see immediately, like even on those pumpkins, look at how much richer it looks than before. So what we are gonna do is get this all clear waxed, and then I'll bring you back in to show us using some of the dark wax. And because I don't want it to be absorbed by the paint, I want, in this case, to have that clear wax down as a bit of a barrier. So we can get the dark wax doing some aging, but I can also wipe it away. There are times that I'll just do the dark wax directly, or any wax, you know, any colored wax directly onto the paint, because I want some of that absorption. But in this instance, I want to be able to use it a little bit more discreetly. I want to be able to use it where I want to use it. Now you could use a wax brush for this, but I gotta tell you, I find chip brushes to be perfect for, you know, moving the wax in and out of all the crevices, and I don't have to worry about the bristles on a good brush. And this is thin enough that it's gonna fit in to all those nooks and crannies, and I don't know, just works great for me. So I'm gonna finish getting all of this waxed up, and then I'll come back to show you how we're going to be using that dark wax, because I know for some of you, you ask a lot of questions because it kind of scares you. So we'll see just the magic of what the dark wax can do on a project like this, but it's looking awesome already. We did a great job with some of the shading and pulling some of those colors in. Now that we have our clear wax, we can begin to do some of our dark wax. Now, what I do have, I still have my clear wax out. I still have my clear wax brush. I have a rag that I will dip into the clear wax if I need to be able to take away, because we've got that barrier now, we can kind of take away. But I have very little of the dark wax on my brush, and I just want to discreetly use it for some shading. Especially think of this as, you know, your shadow. You're adding a little bit of depth with it. You know, everything's going to cast a shadow, and it's just going to look a little bit more. You can use it for aging, which is kind of what we're doing, but we're also doing it to add a little bit more dimension to our pieces here, right? Adding some dark areas to it. Adds a little bit of mystery, but it definitely adds a little bit more distinction to some of it too. Just kind of doesn't look as flat. The other piece, and let me show you on here, is that I'm also going to be adding it to my frame. I don't want it as beige as it is, so I do want to darken it out, kind of highlight the details just a little bit, make it a little bit more rustic. So I will be going for more of that look and finish around the entire frame as well. So I'm just going to carry on doing that waxing. And I love this part. I love the adding and using some of those dark waxes and black waxes, some of the colored waxes, just to add, you know, just more, a little bit more interest to whatever you're doing, right? And I'll probably as well add a little bit of that dark wax around the edges of my picture here, and just kind of dot it and blot it a little bit so that it's not quite as bright around the edges either, so that we create a little bit more lightness in the center, a little bit more lightness. You saw I was doing the bottom of the pumpkin, so the light is going to stay on the top here, kind of highlighting here, and go a little bit darker toward the edges. So I'm loving the look of this. Now, that paint pen that I had used, and I'll put a link, I just got them from Amazon, but you can see how it was able to kind of filter in, give a little bit more dimension to the stems and to the little curlicues. One tip that I have for using those, because they are water-based, if you get a line that looks a little too harsh, you can take a damp paintbrush and just damp with water, and you can soften it. So you're re-engaging the water-based paint. So it doesn't have to be like a super harsh line. You've got more control over it than you may think. So some places where maybe you saw me adding like this line or this, and it just looked a little bit too much, right? In contrast, you can see how that all can get blended in. And all right, I'm gonna carry on. This is our finished project. In this instance, I am not going to be buffing the wax out. I mean, you could a little bit if you want, but I wanted it kind of rustic and rough looking. But here's our project. I think it's such a fun idea to take some of these old pictures, which really aren't that hard to find, you know, maybe not this big. You're gonna get some that are other sizes, but very often with the chicken or the rooster, and people are getting rid of them because they don't suit their environment anymore or their decor or their theme. But such a fun thing to add those pumpkins in, and some of those mushrooms create a little bit more of that harvest look. It already had that golden glow going for it, so it was just a perfect thing to play with these new molds and pulling out some of the existing ones. I love how it turned out. The idea was really inspired by watching some of those painters taking some old paintings, and I mean, they're taking old prints and then they're painting over them. They're adding in extras, changing the mood of it. So something that was nice and light and sunny, they're now adding clouds and darkness and switching it over. I don't necessarily have those painting skills, but you know what? I can do molds, and this was kind of a fun interpretation of that with something that I had thrifted and something now that can be hung up, used through the fall season, and just be part of seasonal decor. Let me know what you think of this one, guys, and let me know if you had managed to snag some of the pumpkin molds from IOD, part of the new release. As of the release of this video, I still have some in the store, queenbeecreationshome.com. A couple of new release items have been sold out, but I still have a number of the others, so check it out if you haven't been able to get them yet yourself, or you had passed on these and now think, oh my gosh, I need to have them. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in as always, and until then, take care.